I want to begin with a word of Talmud. I'm a rabbi, let me teach you a little Talmud. The Gemara asks a question about the suffering of a rabbi. Rabbi Yochanan's student, Rabbi Chia, falls ill. And Rabbi Yochanan comes miraculously and heals Rabbi Chia. A little later on, the Talmud records that Rabbi then Yochanan falls ill, and he cannot lift himself up out of that illness. So Rabbi Hanina has to come and heal Rabbi Yochanan. And so the rabbis in the Talmud ask a question: if Rabbi Yochanan can heal Rabbi Chia, why can't Rabbi Yochanan heal himself? Why does he need Hanina? And the rabbis in the Talmud give one of the most profound statements I think I've read in recent years. It says a prisoner who needs liberation cannot free himself. He needs allies. He cannot stand up alone. Someone who is ill needs someone to care for them. A physician cannot heal themselves. And I am here to tell you that while there is amply bad news out there, there is hate in every quadrant of American and international society. And it is something that keeps me up at night, and frankly, I am grateful that there are organizations like the ADL that can help us confront it. I also believe that it is on the grassroots level that we confront the bifurcation and the alienation that is happening within our society. It is not the national organizations that are going to build bridges. It's what we do in the local community centers. I want to talk for just a moment about what is happening globally. I'll talk for a moment about what is happening among the three of us, but I would like to share some information and some good news. On Holocaust Remembrance Day in January, Mohammed al-Issa, the Secretary General of the Muslim World League, backed by the government of Saudi Arabia, based in the holy city of Mecca, wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post. The article was entitled, maybe you saw it, Why Muslims from Around the World Should Remember the Holocaust. Taking vigorous issue with those in the Muslim world who have trafficked in Holocaust denial, al-Sisi writes, and I quote, "The lessons of the Holocaust are universal, and Muslims around the world have a responsibility to learn from them, heed the warnings, and join international communities to ensure never again means something." In October, al-Sisi took another groundbreaking stand by issuing a strong condemnation of that story that took place in Australia, in which a Jewish boy was bullied into kissing the shoes of a Muslim boy. He writes, "This shameful behavior is contrary to the doctrine of Islam, and they are barbaric acts. Examples of a holy scripture abound, focusing on the importance of respecting Jews. The prophet, peace be upon him, stood solemnly at the funeral of a Jew." In the wake of Poway, Holly, Jersey City, and attacks on Jews, local Muslim organizations came, spoke out at news conferences condemning the attacks and offering emotional succor and financial support to those people who suffered. In some cases, and we need to know this, our Muslim brothers and sisters offered to surround synagogues on Shabbat morning and to defend us as we join together in prayer. Jim Sues, executive director of the New Jersey Council of American Muslim Relations, said, "We stand in solidarity with our Jewish sisters and brothers and ask people of all faiths and backgrounds to repudiate hatred and these apparently motivated heinous acts." The story that motivated me the most, and I don't know if any of you caught it, but I do not follow Twitter. It would just irritate me too much. But there was a story that did appear on Twitter in which a person on the London Underground was bullying a Jewish family, a young family with small Jewish children, yelling and screaming at them, saying, "You are members of the synagogue of Satan." And on that subway, on that underground as they call it, a Muslim woman named Asma Shuweich stood up and confronted toe-to-toe this hate-monger. The hate-monger then turned his wrath upon her, and she stood her ground and allowed that Jewish family to walk out in peace. Locally, my friend Shams Huda has come to Beth Or on numerous occasions, over and over and over again, so that we can study together, share together, and on occasion when it needs to be, stand with us as a compatriot. And I will tell you something, that we have worked together on a number of different causes, and when we spoke, we said, look, we are the three people that the white nationalists hate the most: the Muslims, the blacks, and the Jews. And so we are going to stand together, and we are not going to allow what is happening out there to drive a wedge between that alliance. I will tell you that after Pittsburgh, we didn't know what to do as a synagogue. Literally, we were entering uncharted territory. And I sent an email out on the evening of that attack, Sunday night. The attack was Saturday morning, Sunday night, and I said, if anyone wants to come, we're going to have a service of healing. Over 1,000 people came. Shams spoke, the imam of the mosque spoke, who had been in my synagogue before. Charles spoke, and we stood shoulder to shoulder, confronting hatred. This, turns out, does not come from nowhere. For the past 8 years or so, we have been building a coalition, slowly, quietly, in our area, to address the issues of common threats and how we can work together. Our children have worked on a program called Walking the Walk, where they come together, study, learn, engage, share each other's traditions, visit each other's religious communities, and then work on common social action projects. I want to share with you just something that I keep on my refrigerator wall, on my refrigerator door. It's a picture of my daughter with a head covering, standing with a girl from the North Penn Mosque, whose name, unfortunately, I forget, Sharika. And they are still, to the best of my knowledge, my daughter, who, by the way, is an ardent Zionist, are still in touch. I don't know if they're the closest of friends, but they're still in touch. One particular night I want to share with you that speaks to me. We had all of the members of the youth group of the North Penn Mosque come into my synagogue for a program of study and learning and engagement. And it was time for evening prayers. And so when it's time for evening prayers, it's time for evening prayers. And they're in my shul. So what did they do? They came into my sanctuary, got down on the floor, bowed towards Mecca, and had their evening prayers. And the phrase Allahu Akbar was echoing in the sanctuary halls of my synagogue. I found it rather striking, quite frankly, because they were facing the same direction as Jews face. Our synagogue is oriented towards Jerusalem. They pray towards Mecca. You know, who's going to quibble a few degrees on the compass? We were close enough. To me, that was symbolic of what we're trying to accomplish. To recognize that we pray differently. We may even have different theologies and different politics, but we are human beings, and we have common threats to our physical safety. And we are better, and we are stronger if we stand together. Let me talk for a moment. My time is running long, so I'm going to shorten up a little bit, but I want to talk about my relationship with Charles Kwan. I can't even tell you when that relationship began, but it's been going on for over 30 years. Charles and I became fast friends, and quickly that relationship graduated into relationships between our congregation. I have spoken on his church's pulpit for over 30 years. He has spoken in my congregation for an equal amount of time. And there were some people that said to the pastor, "Why are you having an unsaved Jew speaking on the pulpit on Sunday morning? What does he have to tell us?" And he courageously said, That's who we are, that's who I am, and I am inviting my friend, Rabbi Marx. And I have been coming for 30 years after that. To be perfectly frank, I've had relationships with other churches, and some of those relationships have gone stronger and gotten weaker based upon the position and the policy of the individual pastor. But Charles Kwan, my friend, has always stood by my side, and that relationship is one of the most precious relationships that I have. You need to know that it has graduated beyond us, and Charles and I are both, I have to tell you, I just went to be ID'd recently, and it was a very traumatic experience. They were looking at me, and they were like, how tall are you? How much do you weigh? And they say, what color eyes do you have? And I said, I have brown. And then she said, well, you have gray hair. I said, I do not have gray hair, I have brown hair. So I actually got a little traumatized by that. But Charles and I are concerned that what's going to happen when the two of us retire. It has to be larger than the relationship that the two of us have. Our membership have gone to the Frederick Douglass Home. We have gone to the Holocaust Museum. We have had cooking programs where we learn about our traditional foods. We have had evenings of telling stories from the African American tradition and the Jewish tradition. We have had classes on theology. We travel together, and we're currently working on a joint bus with our youth group going down to the African American Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., and the Holocaust Museum. It is of critical importance that we do that. I want to share with you, and with this I will almost conclude, a letter that Charles wrote to me on November 8th. It shows the depth of our relationship. This was written after that person was trying to blow up and attack the synagogue in Colorado. It was fortunately thwarted. Dear Greg, I've been thinking and praying for you and all my brothers and sisters of the Jewish faith. My heart is heavy as once again I heard the news of a 27-year-old man who has planned to bomb a synagogue. I cannot put into words the pain and heartache I feel when I think of such terrible acts that he planned to commit. We are living in troublesome times, and our places of worship are no longer safe. But I trust in God, and our knowledge gives us the strength to continue on. On behalf of Bethlehem Baptist Church congregation, we offer this prayer for healing. Now, this is coming from a black Baptist preacher. Misha berach abutenu Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, v'imotenu Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, hu yivarech v'yirapeh etchem. For those of you who do not know what the good pastor said in Hebrew, may the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, be with you and give you strength. This does not happen by accident. We are friends because we see not only common threats, but a commonality in our desire to make this world a better place and to build bridges that tear down the isolation and the hatred that is ever growing. Why do we do it? It is quite simple. A prisoner cannot free himself. Thank you.
First of all, let me thank you for this invitation, and thank God for these, my colleagues who have come today to share. As I stand before you, I think of a poet who wrote these words when I was a young man. There's a destiny that makes us brothers and sisters. What you give to the life of others comes back into your own. I believe in my heart that we have a responsibility to care for one another. And also believe that as a Christian, I look at the scripture that simply says, what did the Lord require of us? To do justice, to love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. And so I believe in my heart that there is the opportunity for us to continue to build bridges. I think in order to build bridges, you have to develop relationships. The relationships that I have with these two men of God have really spoken to my heart. I challenge persons at our congregation, who do you associate with? Who are your friends? Who do you spend time with? Because in order to really speak about the life of others, you have to have an intimate relationship with people. I've also been told, and as I'm on some boards that diversity is good for business. I don't agree with that, because business may be booming at one time, but there ought to be a deeper reason why we talk about diversity and inclusion, because that's what God requires of us. One of the things about building bridges is that we can agree and disagree and still maintain relationships. As Rabbi Marx talked about how we have journeyed together, what he did not say is that we have this kind of relationship that allows us to agree and disagree. That relationship is so profound because myself, as a Christian pastor, we refer to each other as Reverend, and I learned to appreciate Greg, even though I have a hard time saying Greg. I have to say Rabbi Marx. But I cannot tell you the times in which our relationship was tested. He did not mention the fact that even when I went to the Million Man March, and there was concerns from the Jewish people why I would be going to the Million Man March, and I told him I was not going because of Malcolm. I was going because I believed we needed to have a presence to make our case known. There have been other times we've had disagreements, but because our relationship is so connected, we can agree even in terms of our own theology. I am who I am by the grace of God, and I have been blessed by God in so many ways, and we need to get rid of some of the myths. I'm going to be honest with you. One of the tragedies is that and I grew up in Philadelphia, and I've heard people, even as we talk about African Americans, the Jewish people have moved out of our community. They moved their synagogue. We are now in the former Beth Or. We've been there since 2006. I continually say to our congregation Beth Or did not move because they were trying to get out of the neighborhood. They moved because they wanted to expand the facility in the township at that point, but not allow them to do that. I had my 25th pastoral anniversary at Beth Or. As he indicated, the kinds of things that have happened. And when he came to our church some years ago, there was some pushback. But I've also discovered that relationships move beyond the pushback. The first time Shams came to our congregation, somebody really took me to task. How could you have someone from Islam come and speak? I said, number one, this is the house of God. He didn't do anything that was offensive. He was invited because I invited him. I believe that all of us have a responsibility to make sure that our places of worship, wherever they may be a place where people are accepted, regardless of their faith, regardless of their ethnicity. I cannot be who I am without speaking about the cause of our Jewish brothers and sisters. Here we are in February, Black History Month. Dr. King gave his life for people of all walks of life. I believe that we cannot be on defense. We have to be on offense. We cannot walk around like we're defeated. We have to know who we are and know whose we are and work together to continue to send this message across this country that racism will not win, sexism will not win, anti-Semitism will not win, because we believe more than just a soundbite that love is stronger than hate. We have to say that, we have to show that, and we have to believe in that. We're living now in a country that's so divided. And I tell people all the time that we also have to be careful that we don't label everybody who's Republican as someone who's against us, or everybody who's a Democrat is for us. Be careful how you move that. And I've also seen families and friends break up over these kind of relationships. If love is stronger, we can have dialogue. And I also believe that no matter how Donald Trump may continue to serve, that he's only going to have a short term. I'm hoping it's not the next term, but we serve a God who's deeper and greater than he. And we look at where the Jewish people have come from slavery, all other kind of things. You're here today because of Yahweh, of God. And I'm here today in spite of all we've gone through with slavery and segregation and everything else. By the grace of God, we're still moving on, still moving forward. As an African American, I'm stopped at times by police officers who may not look like me. I hear people say sometimes, which is offensive, you're not like them. What does that mean? You're not like them. Who are them? So when I talk about that, when I talk about this matter of who we are, building bridges, and Rabbi Marx talked about a relationship, I can't even believe it's been over 30 years. But the relationship is far greater than him and I. It's about the congregation. It's also about how we move. I pastor an African American church. I cannot speak here today and feel comfortable about just being an African American church. I'm concerned about immigrants. I'm concerned about anybody who goes through what you and I have experienced. So when we see something, we have to say something. And again, we have to say it loud and clear. So if another person of another nationality, ethnicity, or faith is being persecuted, we have to speak up and speak out loud and clear. We cannot allow ourselves to be comfortable because we have been blessed in certain situations. I'm looking at this facility now. There were times when African Americans couldn't even come in this facility. But we're here now. There are times that many of us fail to recognize that our journey is not that separated, not that far apart. I know something about what you've been through. And prayerfully, you know something about what we've been through. But together we can make a difference. And we have to make that difference in terms of our children, in terms of our society, in terms of all the things that are going on. We cannot allow hate to overcome the good things that are happening in the lives of this people. I'm committed, not because it's the right thing to do. I'm committed because this is what God has called me to do. I cannot stand in the pulpit at Bethlehem Baptist Church and not allow myself to speak out against anything that would happen to anybody in this country. Whether it's a Jewish person, whether it's a Latino person, it doesn't matter. We're all children of God. We all bleed the same way. And I have been blessed by God to be around other individuals. I speak about this matter everywhere I go. And I recognize everybody's on the same page, but that's their problem, not my problem. And I believe in my heart that God is called. What is a prophet? One who speaks for God. So there's a lot of commonality that we have as men of God, because God has given us an opportunity to lead God's people, and we cannot lead in that which we don't believe in. You got to believe in it. You got to press, and you got to move forward, even if there's opposition. I'm telling you that we can change if we believe in what we're doing. I have a deep and honest respect for those individuals. I kind of laugh at times when people say, "Where are you going for dinner?" I'm going to Pumpernicks. I go to Pumpernicks and have a dinner. I have tremendous relationships there. In fact, on Friday night, that's my date night. I look for a nice date night to go. I go to Pumpernicks. But I say that because I've met so many people, and the beauty of it is that people have the same concerns. Our children, our welfare, our concerns. There's so many things we have in common, and we have to stand tall against what's going on in this country and what's going on in the world. When I wrote that letter to Rabbi Marx and the congregation, I didn't just read it, I told the congregation. I don't want it just to be me. I'm concerned about who was coming after me, that the next pastor will have the same kind of heart to move the congregation. We are starting to build bridges, but we have a long way to go. But I still believe we can get there. We work together, and even understand that relationships also, if you have an intimate relationship, I tell this all the time. I've been married for a number of years. I tell anybody who's been married for a number of years, you've also had some disagreements. It's quiet in here. Baptist preaching like a little amen. That's the same way in terms of relationships. But our honesty and our relationship with one another has allowed us to move beyond that. We have a deeper cause. And we have to leave here knowing that we have to fight together, stay together, not walk around like we defeated, or walk around like we're victorious, that Yahweh is still God, and that He's able to bring us through. Look at your past experience. You've been through some things before. I know something about how God has blessed the people of Israel. I know something how God has blessed African Americans. And we will not give in to hate. We will rise above that. I use the words of Michelle Obama. When they go low, we go high. When they go low, we go high. Hate cannot rule. We cannot even afford to start hating Donald Trump. We can't, because hate begets hate. So we have to pray for him. And praying for him means you got to get down on your knees, because he needs a lot of prayer. But we cannot succumb ourselves to this kind of movement in this country. We have to build bridges, allow people to see us as human beings, that we have a lot of commonality, we have a lot of purpose in life. God has given us the opportunity to change what is taking place now. We have to be agents of change. So I'm grateful for all the work that you do. I know some people here, but I am committed, as God gives me strength every day, to speak out against any kind of injustice. Doesn't matter what it is. I cannot, as God's servant, allow myself to be complacent because God has blessed me. I have an obligation to much is given, much is required. I must speak out. And if I have to speak singly, it's okay, because I know that ultimately God holds me accountable. The preacher, the rabbi, the priest, they are accountable to God, and so we cannot allow people to push us out of what God has called us to do. Speak out loud and clear. Say it with passion and with sincerity, that this is who we are. We will not allow racism or sexism or classism or anything else to get in the way. When one person hurts, we all hurt. And I believe this, that no one speaks for us, who will speak for you? We have to leave here committed to say that the fight is not over. We're going to fight until justice prevails. And do it with the grace and power of God, that knowing that God is stronger than hate. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here, but that's who I am. God has not called me just to be comfortable in that pew that I have. He's called me to challenge God's people. I do it here, everywhere I go. I want this world to know that God is bigger, His love, His power, His grace, and He's called us to make a difference. And I've learned something in life. When you're blessed and you're comfortable, if you're not careful, you'll become an easy Zion. The older we get and the more comfortable we become, it's easy to say, you know what, I've done enough, I've finished my course, let me go home and rest. It's no time to rest, it's time to fight. Do I have any fighters in here? Amen. Do I have any fighters in here? Do I have any fighters in here? We want to say we stand for race, the end of injustice. And I am who I am because my relationship, listen to this. Now I'll close this. Baptist preachers always talk, I'm going to close. My relationship with these two men did not happen because of me. The providence of God allowed that to happen. Nothing happens by chance or by accident. The providence of God, when I came to that community, I had no idea I would meet either one of them. But God had orchestrated so that our relationship would take us to this point, and we're here now because of what God has done. And I'm telling you, if we follow God, you can't go wrong. But you have to have courage. You have to be willing to speak. You have to be willing to stand against anyone who would come against you. Sometimes even in our families, people disagree. In my church, when I talk about being a multicultural church, in this society, there's some folks say, Pastor, I don't know what you're doing. We're comfortable here, but we're not called to be comfortable. We're called to push people to another level. And I don't want my life to be that I didn't do anything for anybody. If I can help somebody along the way, then my living is not in vain. And finally, I'll tell you this, and I tell my sons this all the time. When I die, my sons will not want my ties. They don't want them now. They will not want my suits. But if I can leave a good name, if I can leave with them the importance of helping somebody else, building bridges, then I've done what God has called me to do. I want to leave that legacy with my children, my grandchildren, so they will not have to experience what I've experienced, and they don't have to sit back and talk about how we can build bridges. They can talk about how God has brought us over. That's my desire for them, that they might have a better life. They did not experience this racism and all anti-Semitism, bullying our children, picking out on them because of their nationality or because of their faith. And many children are still bullied in that way. Jewish children, black children, who go through so much pain. We have to make sure that they don't have to experience that all their lives, and we can erase that and eliminate that. And so I need you to let me know that you hear what I'm saying. And if you were in church, you would say, that's it. You know what that means? Amen means you're in agreement. Amen means ditto. So if you're ready to say that we're here today to walk together, to build bridges and make life better for our Jewish brothers and sisters, African Americans, Latinos, Koreans, anybody else who's experienced that, then just say amen. Say it like you're really there. Say amen. Amen. No, say it like you're really there. Amen.
Thank you so much. After I talk, there'll be a question and answer session, right? Is that right?
Correct.
Since this is my first opportunity, only opportunity to ask you a question, how many of you have seen Misfits, the movie Misfits? It was acted by Marilyn Monroe.
Shams.
It was acted by Marilyn Monroe. So anyway, just by the name of it, so that you know that's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling that I'm an acting role in Misfits. The reason I'm saying this is because the two previous speakers, they are preachers. I'm not. That's why you'll not hear a speech from me, but I'll say whatever I can as a total, I think they call them layman. So I had a similar situation. Well, before I go into that, Rabbi Marx made my life very difficult at this moment because he started by reciting from the scripture. And since I'm not an imam, I'll not be able to recite something from the Quran the way he did from the scripture, from the Torah. But I remember one sentence in the Quran. If I mispronounce it, please forgive me because Arabic is not my mother tongue. I have tried to pronounce it as correctly as possible. يَعْلَمُ مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمَا خَلْفَهُم. God, Allah is saying, I'll not hear what you're saying. I'll see what is in your heart. We can fake anybody and everybody. There's one entity we cannot fake. And if we keep that in mind, we'll be able to do many of our, if not most of our works in the most effective way. Now, once upon a time, not too long ago actually, after 9/11, I was asked to speak at a church by a pastor. He has since passed away. And I asked the pastor, what should I say? He said, whatever you want to say. And I'm telling you very candidly, I didn't have the foggiest idea as to what I should say. So courageously I went up this dais and I just thought about one of my sons. At that time they were very young. They were 1.5 and 2.5 years old. Their mother had passed away a little while earlier than that. So what I remembered is one day, the first day of my youngest son's Halloween night, I took him out. I took him to the first neighbor's house and he got some candy. And this is the first time in his life that he was given some candy by a stranger. He was so ecstatic, so he started to run back home. And he fell down. He fell right, with his face up and his head down. And to be honest with you, I'm telling you candidly, it came to me as a sound, like a cracking sound. I was petrified. I picked him up. The first thing that son of a gun told me is that he has seen lots of stars. The reason he said that to me, I thought his brain has collapsed and he's getting hallucination. But the reason he said that is because when he fell down, his eyes were facing the sky, so he saw lots of stars. And I don't think he got into that situation ever in his life. The first time he got into the situation where he was lying down outside and he was looking at the sky as he was seeing the stars. The pastor, after I concluded my story, the pastor came up the dais and he lifted up. I don't think I'm that fragile a person, but he lifted up lifted me up, and he was so ecstatic. I could not figure out why. The pastor told me, we all need to see the stars. We all need to see hopes and future. Coming back to what the rabbi and the pastor said, again, they're preachers, I'm not, so I'll make it as simple as possible. Although they are at a very high level than I am, religiously speaking, they have become very good friends of mine, and I can talk very freely with them. So not long ago, about 3 weeks ago, I was talking with Rabbi Marx, and I asked him, Rabbi, irrespective of who does what to me, what is my duty? And I did not wait the rabbi to answer me, because the answer he would give me would go over my head. So I just told him, Rabbi, what I feel is that irrespective of who does what to me, my duty always remains permanent in me. That means each of us have a duty to perform, and we must perform those duties irrespective of who is doing what to us. Especially nowadays, the kind of animosity that is spewed from one place of this country, we must not give up our sense of duty. We must not, retire from what we are supposed to do. We must do what we have to do. We have to reach out. We have to make friends. I'm very fortunate in my life, because when I was growing up, there were Christians and Hindus, and there were a few other Buddhists and other denominations. I feel very fortunate, because right from my childhood days, I could make friends with them. I thank God so much for that opportunity, because when you mix with people, your hatred goes away. I don't think I have any Hindu friend whom I can call an enemy. Not a single Christian friend whom I can call an enemy. And they are still my enemies. Since my childhood days, we still correspond with each other. So what I'm trying to say, open up. Irrespective of what you think about others, go and meet with them. A lot of people who have come to see the North Penn Mosque, they have told me, including our pastor, he told me, Shams, is the first time I came to your mosque. Is that right, Pastor? And there was one group of Hindu, women who came to the mosque. And I know that in India there are lots of mosques. So they also told me, Shams, is the first time I'm coming to your mosque. I said, why? There are lots of mosques in India. I said, we never went. We must always look at ourselves. Let's not blame others. So I told her, why didn't you go to your mosque? He said, well, I was fearful. So based on what Rabbi Marx and Pastor Kwan said, we must not give ourselves up because we are fearful. We must do our duties. So those of you who have not seen the North Penn Mosque or any mosque, please come. The North Penn Mosque is open, and although since I have eaten good food over here, you can ask me any question and I'll not get offended. So with that, I'll stop here. You can start to ask questions.
So first off, I just want to thank all three of you. That was great. The remarks were great. We're just getting the mic set up, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Oh, the mic is set up. Okay. So Robin has the microphone. Robin, I think they're just getting ready for the recorder. Okay.
Thank you all for coming here today. I don't want to downplay the efforts that you're making on yourselves, but somewhat rhetorical question. If I do my math correctly, I think there's another 80 to 85% of America that's not represented on our panel. What can we do to reach out to the other 80 to 85% that are the others that we're talking about joining up together to defend against?
I can respond to the, do you want me to?
Yeah, so just to repeat the question, it's great, the work that the three of you are doing are great, but that there is another roughly 85% of America, according to Steve's math, that is not represented by this panel. What can we do to reach out to them?
We wanted to bring every religious denomination here, but Shira wouldn't give us the time because the program would run too long. In all seriousness, look, we are 3 out of 20 members of the Wissahickon Faith Community Association. There are many denominations present, and we all sit down and we break bread together once a month. We talk about issues, we talk about our concerns, we talk about the threats to our democracy, to the religious community. So we are just a small sampling of that organization. I will tell you that this is a unique relationship that we have, because I really do believe that among the many denominations out there, we are united, and I hate to say this, by the hatred that is coming from the radical right. And I know that there are threats that come from the radical left, but as I've often joked, the radical left will attack me with 1,000 paper cuts, right? The radical right is going to break into my synagogue and shoot the place up. And so I am terrified of more of the radical right than I am of the radical left, but both are challenges. Those are challenges to all three of us. The radical right is a challenge to the African American community, the Muslim community, and the Jewish community. If you don't believe me, look at New Zealand, look at South Carolina, look at Poway and Pittsburgh. So we have something in common that, quite frankly, some of the other minority faiths don't have. And that draws us together, and that's why we continually stand shoulder to shoulder and try to build those bridges so the divisions don't dominate.
I believe the other thing that's so important is building relationships. We have seen some changes in our community with Korean churches, Chinese churches, and you invite them, there's a sense of fear. And so it's important for us to talk about relationships once we build a relationship, because what's going on in this country now, there's this fear that they may be targeted. And I'm certainly appreciative of the Wissahickon Faith Community, as Rabbi Marx has indicated, because it brings us together. Episcopal Church, Chinese Church, and other congregations. And it's still a work in progress, but I certainly appreciate your question.
I somehow do not feel that we are unique. We may be unique as an example based on the 80% you're talking about, but we did not have to force ourselves to build up this relationship. It came automatically. I think both of you will agree. So if we are an exception, I don't think it is very difficult or at all difficult to, multiply it in many, many places. And we can do that by the kind of thing that you are doing today. And had you invited, again, I'm not trying to offend anyone, have you invited the Buddhists, the Hindus and others, they would have seen and they would have tried to do the same thing. And I know for a fact there are other groups who are trying to emulate us. And they see that it's a very easy thing to do. So anyway, I encourage all of you to, if you see that we are doing something good, you can sort of, create the same kind of relationships among other people. It's not that difficult.
Other questions?
Judith Meyer, Chair Emerita. The ADL has formed the Black Jewish Alliance. I am also a member of Salam Shalom, which is a Jewish-Muslim sisterhood. What more should our synagogues, our mosques, our churches be doing? The three of you talk about brothership, collaboration, appreciation of the other, but we as your congregants, although we share that belief, I do not have the opportunity to break bread with Muslims except in this sisterhood. I have had African Americans to my home once through the ADL Alliance, but that's not enough. I should be meeting, breaking bread with communities, different communities, more frequently. All of us, I believe, we live in our bubble and say the right words, but you and we need to create more opportunities to bring us visibly together so that we can look at each other and appreciate each other. And I task you with that. I task the ADL with that.
Okay. Is there a question, Judy?
The question is, why is not my synagogue and Rabbi Marx, your synagogue, having dinners monthly with different mosques and churches? Why are you not creating the opportunity for your congregants and the three of you that we can all intermingle? Okay, that's my question.
Okay, so just to repeat the question, how can we get the rest of us involved beyond just the leaders of the congregation?
The church comes to a Passover Seder at our synagogue every year. Some years, maybe less so, but every year we invite members of Bethlehem Baptist Church to come to our Passover Seder and to share those stories. Monthly meetings and monthly gatherings, I think sometimes are a little difficult because we don't always have the bandwidth to come together and have dinners with, for our own celebrations. I think it's of critical importance. We could do more, but I think sometimes it's a question of how much can we do and what is reasonably within our scope. We do have something called, and I would task you if you're engaged in a synagogue or a church, we have something called an ecumenical luncheon. It happens only once a year, but there we invite every religious group and the members of that congregation to come to the synagogue. We study a little text, they learn a little bit about Jewish tradition, we have a lovely lunch, and then we have a lecture. So, I mean, it's not once a month, it is once a year, but I think that's a step, and I think people appreciate that. Is there more we can do? Absolutely. But sometimes there are limitations in terms of how broad we can stretch ourselves. I don't know if you want to.
I probably have to stand up when I say this because you are to be commended. I want to be very transparent. In the city of Philadelphia, and I certainly appreciate the Black Jewish Alliance in the city of Philadelphia, it's difficult to be able to align a African American church with a synagogue. Gentrification is taking place, crime is rampant, people are fearful, there's still a sense of mistrust. So I think again, the challenge is not just so much how we can kind of build ourselves, because I think our relationship is going to continue to flourish, but how do we get other congregations involved? How do we get other inner city rabbis or clergy persons involved? And there's a divide. There is a divide. There's a divide in poverty. There's a divide in mistrust in our neighborhoods. Gentrification has literally pushed people out. And so many of our Black congregations have either relocated, I'm being honest with you, have moved out of the neighborhood. Some of those congregations are dwindling in terms of numbers. And it's also taking place in Montgomery County. The community where we moved from, Pending community, where it's certainly a Black community, is now dealing with gentrification. There was just an article in the newspaper as well as on TV about Ardmore in terms of that African American community. So there still is a sense of divide. So I don't think it's so much how we can, I mean, you heard Rabbi Marx, myself, and Sean, we're doing all we can, but we want to broaden the scope. And it's commendable that you have some African American pastors, but everybody's not on that same page. Believe me when I tell you, everybody's not on that same page. There still is a sense of mistrust. If you take even Temple, that wanted to build that stadium in North Philadelphia, do you realize that divide in that community? So all of this is relevant to our discussion this afternoon, and we have to be honest, but that doesn't mean that we give in, but it doesn't mean we look at the challenges. And I can tell you that and I don't want to say with some humility, I'm committed because, as Sean just said, we didn't just say we're gonna do this. It just happened. It happened because of the providence of God. I didn't just go out and say, I want to find a nice Jewish rabbi. I mean, I'm serious. The relationship just built. And so how do we continue to build upon these relationships to get other congregations? And everybody's not there. I mean, I wish I could say every African American, everybody's not there. We have women in ministry. Every black church, particularly Baptist church, is on sovereign body. So how we move in that direction? But I think again that all of us can say, how can I help where I am? How can I help build some bridges in terms of the community where I am? Not just Bethlehem and Congregation Bethel and North Bend Mosque, but how can we get more people at the table? So when I look around, I see just maybe one or two persons of color. How do we get more people involved with what you're doing? Because what you're doing is God sent. But how do we get more people so it's not them against us? We're all working together. That's a long answer.
All of you are familiar with the month of Ramadan, right?
Sure.
It's coming up on the, I believe it will start on the 24th of April. It will go for roughly about a month, 29 or 30 days. In the month of Ramadan, I can tell you at least about the North Bend Mosque. The doors are open. So right after sunset, come there, we'll have good food, and will mix with us, we'll make good friends. So anyway, what I'm telling you, you have to get out. Don't even wait for invitations. As a matter of fact, I can guarantee you, irrespective of which mosque you go to, if you enter a mosque in the month of Ramadan, nobody is going to say, you cannot come in. Or you're a Jew, you cannot get in. Nobody will say that. Because that's totally against Islam, and in the month of Ramadan, people are very pious, so they will not have the guts to say it. So anyway, please, if you think that we are doing something good, it is not at all difficult. Open up, and as I said, it is our duty, individual duty, to go and make friends with others. And if you do that, our life will be easier. It will be more productive and a happier life. So do it. If you have not done it, start it. Thank you.
Okay.
I
we're
want to say
gonna
one
take-
more thing before you do.
Sure.
It's not about events. It's not about events. It's not about how we can put more things on the calendar. This is what I tried to say. Maybe I didn't make it clear enough. This is how we move. And I'm going to just show you one example how this is done. I don't know this brother over here personally, but it's about building relationships. How you doing? Tell me about your family. Yeah, tell me now. You know, we have a lot in common. I have a wonderful wife and 4 children. Thank you so much. I mean, it's about building relationships. Because we can do all the events and people walk away and say that was nice, but how do we begin to talk about personal relationships that we can build on?
Amen. Thank you. We'll take one final question. Does anybody have a final question before we close today? We won't have a final question.
Seriously, any one of you, would you get up and say if you have benefited from this gathering?
Yes.
Yes. Not just yes, how and why.
We get a volunteer on that.
We heard do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. I think that's something that we should all take with us. It'll stick with me. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and especially let's give another round of applause for our panel. Ed, you gonna?
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. And to everybody. Turns out that Nancy Bear pulled the fire. I just heard